little conversations, you and I, so anyways, where were you born?
In Nichols Hospital in Peterborough.
The old Nichols Hospital, I remember that. I spent a couple of weeks there quite a few years ago. Just for the last day of school. Anyways, and who were your parents?
Sandy and Marion Millage.
Sandy, Alexander Millage?
Alexander.
Alexander. Most people would know him as Alexander, but when you went to the liquor store, you always knew Sandy.
That's correct.
Right.
Yes.
And your grandparents?
John and Mary Millage.
Okay. And you had an uncle that lived in Lakefield for quite some time? Uncle Alex?
Uncle Alec, yes.
Yeah, he did, yeah. He was a great old fellow, I remember him quite well.
It's my father's uncle.
He's right, right. Anyways, and where did you go to school?
Lakefield Public School, as they call it then.
Yeah, yeah,
They still call it Lakefield High School.
yeah. I don't know. Lakefield Secondary School, isn't it?
It's Lakefield Secondary School now, but it
Lakefield
was
District Secondary School.
Yeah, so it's not a high
Lakefield
school
High School
anymore.
now.
Yeah,
then.
yeah. And where did you go to college or?
I went to Ryerson for part of a year, and then I quit.
Did
And
you?
I went to work for the Bank of Montreal.
Oh, right in the banking business. Well, that's a good idea. And where did you go after that?
I came back to Lakefield. I lived in Toronto for a while with the bank, and then I came back to Lakefield, and I went to work for the Village Lakefield in
And you were,
1967.
right. And you were Mr. Harry T. Hill's assistant at the time?
That's correct.
Yeah.
H.T. Hill.
Did you have any stories you could tell us about Mr. Hill? Or did he tell too many? Did he tell too many himself?
Well, he told a lot of stories. Like, there are lots of stories you could tell about Harry Hill. Where do you want to start? What kind of stories?
Just say a few of us, and then we'll go on from there.
Oh, Lord. Well, Harry was a character that kept a lot of people. I guess the first thing I could say about Harry is a lot of people didn't like Harry for various reasons, but on the other hand, there was a lot of people that did like him,
Right.
and there was a lot of people that didn't really know him that well,
Right.
and didn't know a lot of things that he did that nobody knew that he did them.
Right.
I remember one time he came in to the office after having his lunch, and he said, "Well, I'm going away. I'm taking the wife out to visit her brother out in at someplace in BC. Bill Hendren, I think his name was."
Yeah.
And he said, I said, "When are you leaving?" He said, "Well, we're leaving Sunday." And he said, "I just told the wife." I said, "Why didn't you tell her sooner?" Oh, he said she would have driven herself crazy getting ready. And there's lots of stories like that. He was quite well known. A lot of the people that came in, I have to be prompted. I can tell you stories. If you've got three out, like I can go on and on and on, but I don't know what kind of stories do you want?
Any kind of story. just for-
John, when you started to work for the village, did you and Harry Hill do all that business in there, that there were dozens of people in there later to do that work that the two of you did?
Well, when I started working in the village office, which was the hydro office at that time too, there was only the two of us, but Harry had Annette Leahy, who was Annette Brown, came in and helped us, and Sherry Darling came in and helped us from time to time. But over the years I've been asked that question a lot, but there's a lot, you have to remember there's a lot more going on now
Yeah.
than there was. In 1967, things really weren't in the municipal business quite the same as they are now. They used to have a council meeting, I think, once a month. Now I think, Mary, they probably meet once a week. I know where I work now, we pretty well meet once a week. That's not even the committee meetings and all that. There's been a lot of changes, tremendous changes in the business. So yes, We did work there for, I guess, a couple of years. Harry retired, I think, in '72. I started working in '67, and he retired in '72, and from then on, things sort of changed.
Mhm.
We came into the 20th century after that. Harry was a little old-fashioned still. They still were dealing, as a lot of municipalities were, they were dealing in
Is that-
the old way.
What, John, I'd like to give you an opportunity to explain that some people liked Harry and some didn't. What I knew of him, he was a good man and a moral man and an ethical man, and I thought those who disliked him because of duties of his job that he was forced to
That's
do
correct.
that maybe did not please them. But really, as a person, you couldn't say, character-wise, I thought he was of excellent.
He was of
Yes.
excellent character.
Yeah.
And that's exactly right, Neil.
Uh-huh.
Those people that didn't like Harry were for the most part people who he dealt with in some of the difficult parts of doing what he's doing.
And he was the law in Lakefield, wasn't
Yes,
he?
he was.
Because of default by some of us councillors, including me, and by necessity, in that he was the spokesperson for all of our councils. So he had to give unpopular decisions out to many of the citizens, didn't he? That's not true. You do today, I imagine.
Harry said that he told me once, he said, now this, when he was still working before he retired, the Lakefield, it was before they had planning boards and official plans and zoning bylaws and all those types of things. They were just getting into building inspection. Now Harry said in 1930, he went overseas. I don't know what year it was, but he was overseas, and then he came back, and he was the clerk prior to that, and then he took some time off, and then he was the clerk, I think, after when he came back from overseas, and they appointed him as acting building inspector. Okay, now when he retired in 1972, he was still acting building inspector. It hadn't changed.
I remember when they put the water and into Lakefield and the plumbing, our block didn't want it because a lot got their water from the village, from the river, you see. And then we had, at that time I had the house rented. I don't know whether Hugh Faulkner had it at that time or not. Anyway, it was a very dry summer and people were running out of their wells, running out of water and having a hard time. And I was in Toronto then and I wrote to Lakefield to ask if we could have, if I could be connected up to the waterworks, not knowing that the rest of the block was cut off, that nobody had the water or plumbing at that time, but other people in the village did, you see. So I've still got the letters that are really interesting. What I wanted to say was Harry may have been a little slower about his ideas, but he was right every time. He wanted to be right. And he wrote back to me finally after a bit of correspondence and said that if I got 75% of the people on the block to say that they would take the sewer and the water, they'd put it in for us. So not knowing everybody on the block, I had to go to door to door to door asking them if they were interested. And everybody but one, I would say the wealthiest person on the block, didn't want it. And but said, you know, if I couldn't get 75%, that they would. And so anyway, the last person I went to was the priest, and he was all for getting it in. So we sent it back, and so they said yes, we could. And we had a choice of paying it outright or paying so much a month for the rest of our lives, I guess, you know, I don't know. Anyway, I paid mine out and said, well, I want to get rid of it. I didn't want to have to be paying it for the rest of my life. And so they put it in. And of course, they put it in while I was away in Toronto. And one weekend I came back. A car, if it drove in my driveway, it would have disappeared. It just caved in, you know. So anyway, they came and fixed that up. But it's quite interesting. And Harry was wonderful. He was very careful. I would say perhaps that was it with any dealings I had to do with him. He was very careful and wanted to be sure.
And that was in 1957.
So I liked him. I thought he was a very nice chap.
Did
I
you
didn't
have
know
it?
him very well.
I was gonna, talking about the water, that was in 1957 and 58 that Armstrong
When they
Brothers
put the
it in,
water?
yes.
Yeah.
And
Oh, well it
they-
was much later than that.
I remember, I just forget exactly what year it was that they put the water up our street, which is Rabbit Street, and the old fellow that you were mentioning before, my father's Uncle Alec,
Yeah.
lived down the street in the little red brick house where Vina Nichols lived, and my mother was in the habit of, on Sunday evening or every evening, you know, we had a meal, she'd fix up a little plate, and my dad would take it down to Uncle Alec. He was quite an eccentric old fellow. So this Sunday night she had a big turkey dinner, and we had a lot of people there. So my dad, it was pouring rain, and the trench had been dug from Albert Street up the street to our house. So anyways, my dad left and went down to deliver this thing to this meal. And about half an hour later, the back door opened and knocked on the door and opened up. My dad had fallen into this trench. He was standing there and he had fallen into about this much muck. And that's what one of the things that I remember about when they put in when they put in the waterworks. And I know Len was probably a little older, but I was just a young kid, and we used to run around all over the place and grab up the dynamite wire that was left from the blasting, little colored wire, and we used to use it on knives, and we used to use it on bicycle for bicycle handles, and it was quite used. Harry was pretty comical. There was a lot of people who used to congregate in the office, a lot of his friends. I got a lot of knowledge and a lot of history just from being around, being exposed to those old people like Doc Fraser and
Yeah, the Frasers live right next door
Judge
to us.
Judson Hall, or he went by another more popular name. Can I say that, or is that?
Oh, yeah,
Mucker.
indeed.
I would think you're
Mucker.
known as Mucker.
Yeah.
Yeah, very well known as Mucker.
I was sitting in the office. He used to have, if you remember, a little wee cubby hole that was just piled with books. And anyways, he said Ted Brown and Bill Ingram. Do you remember Bill Ingram?
Yep.
That worked for the village. And he was working actually with Ted Brown on the hydro. And Ted was in to the office, and he was leaning over the counter. And anyways, Harry yells out, Ted, I think I know where that telephone or that hydro pole is that you lost last week. And he said, where? He said, the doodler's coming in with it in his mouth. He was talking about Garnet Sachs. He used to call Garnet the doodler. Chief.
I was wondering if you had any comment on the policing of the village.
Yes.
When
Yes,
Harry
I-
was overseas, the village appointed Butch Northey as clerk of the village of Lakefield. And then Harry came home and was demobbed, and he got working back in the office, and he had the adding machine. You know, he'd add 6 and 4 and he'd get 15, you know, and all this sort of thing. And so he reported it around. He said, this thing doesn't work. And B. Dent says, well, that's because Butch Northey was running it for so long.
I was working after schools on Saturday. They didn't have Sunday store openings then, for butts, nor they.
Mhm.
And it was around the time, I remember coming home, one of my job requirements was to come home from school. I was going to high school at the time, and I had to go at noon and get the mail. And I remember this day coming home and stopping at the post office. This is not where it is now, where the old post office was, and getting the mail and taking it in. And that was the morning that Jack Leonard died. I remember that. Yes, he shot himself. Yeah, it was quite a shock.
Yeah.
Who died?
Jack Leonard
Oh, yes.
in the hardware store.
Right.
That was quite a you know, in a small town, that was quite an experience. But,
Traumatic, yeah.
no, it's there's a lot of things that went on in the town hall. I remember Stan Windsor used to come in, and he used to come in on a Stan couldn't read or write. I don't know whether he could read a little bit or not, but he had a very difficult time. And every time he got something in the post office, he used to bring it over, and I used to read it for him. And he was got to be a pretty good old friend of mine. I enjoyed him. A lot of people, like my dad, knew him years and years before, because my dad worked back at the Nephilim mine. Actually, he worked there twice. He worked in the 30s,
Yeah.
and then he was away from there for a while, and then he went back and worked in the shipping office until he went to work in the liquor store, but it opened. But Stan Windsor apparently was a cook
Right
there.
The camp.
Yeah, for the
Yes,
camp.
yeah. Who were the works persons on the roads? Clint McCall?
Clint McCall was the foreman. Johnny Coughlin was his assistant.
Ace assistant.
He was his ace assistant, and then when they got into real difficulty, they used to bring in Doug Dunford. Okay?
Uh-huh.
And I remember,
Extremely.
I don't know whether George, there was a water main break over at, right across from Coyle's, right in front of where the house is, where the body shop is, just in there. And Clint had gone over in the morning and with Johnny and Doug, and they dug it up. They dug it by hand, like there was no, they didn't have, they had to start with a pick and shovel and dig it up. So they got down to this water main break, and anyways, they waited. Clint had gone away someplace, and Clint came back, and they got down in the hole and started to repair it, because they couldn't. They were just handing them down tools. So anyways, Clint said, Clint told me this, but anyways, Clint said now, he got finished about 11:45. So when he got up out of the hole, Johnny and Doug were headed for the truck with the tools. He says, "Where are you going?" And they said, "Well, we're going for lunch." He said, "No, we're going to fill the hole in before lunch." So they filled in the hole before he made them, before he let them go for lunch. He said and that was the way Clint worked. They were going to take an early lunch, but Clint said he had other ideas. Clint had back to the waterworks. They were putting a water main up on one of the streets. I think it was over on, what's that, Dean Street, in that area.
Yeah.
And he had Aubrey Coppaway working for him from Clerk Lake.
Uh-huh.
And Aubrey sometimes didn't show up in the morning, and when he did show up, he sometimes wasn't really that good, in that good a shape. So anyways, Clint said Aubrey was down in the trench, and a guy came along and pulled up with his car, and he said he was a bill collector, and Aubrey had bought a watch on time from one of the stores. And he said, is there a fellow by the name of Aubrey Coppaway here? And Aubrey says, no, he said, he used to work here, but he has been gone for about 2 weeks. So anyways, the guy went over to Clint, okay, and he said, do you have any idea where Aubrey Coppaway might be? I understand he used to work for you. And Clint said, well, that's kind of strange. He says, he's right over there. So he went back over and he says to Aubrey, no, I know it's you. And Aubrey said, well, I figured you'd be back. And he said, I don't have the money to pay for the watch, but he said, here, you can have the watch. And he took it off and gave it to him.
When did it go in Lakefield?
The water?
Mm.
57. Armstrong Brothers. 57 and 58. Yes.
I'm not too, I must look at those batteries. I've got all of this because they, usually when I run into them, they amuse me, you know.
John, you must have, you have quite good recollections. You must have had some experiences in school. Who were some of your cherished classmates?
Well, there's one here, and I don't really want to get into that. Because I can't really tell very much because I might be accused of lying or something. Sandy was she was a lot older than I was.
You were clever. You were intelligent.
I went to school with Miss Kidd, Elsie Kidd. I think everybody did. And we used to always run, of course I was living where I was, not very far from her, where she lived. And we used to run up and get her hand in kindergarten, and she'd walk us to school. And in those days they had kindergarten in the morning and in the afternoon. There were the morning kids and then the afternoon kids. Kenny Souls, does anybody remember Kenny Souls? Well, Kenny Souls went in the afternoon, and I went in the morning, and there was a reason for that. It's to kind of keep us kind of apart. We were neighbors. And anyways, my dad, we had a cottage and property up at Deer Bay, Lower Buckhorn, I guess they call it now. And I love going up there, like, you know. So anyways, he decided this one morning that he was going to go to the lake in the morning. And of course I had to go to school, but Kenny got to go. And the reason that I knew it, Kenny had needed his mitts. It was in the fall, and he had left them at school the day before. So anyways, my dad had to bring Kenny to the school and send him in to get his mitts. And I said, well, where are you going? He says, well, we're going to the lake. I wouldn't know anything about it. I was really upset. I wanted to go home. And,
did Miss Kidd ever give anyone the strap that you
not
know?
that I know of.
Well, I talked to a gentleman today that got the strap from Miss Kidd.
Well,
And he said it was embarrassing. And he said it was even more embarrassing when he got to be 25, and even more embarrassing than that when he got to be 30. He said that he got the strap
When he
from
was
Miss
30?
Kidd, who we love, and that was Eldon B. Jewell.
I can see that.
He said, she pulled me up in front of the class in kindergarten and strapped me. And it must have been a mistake.
There was a Miss Kennedy that used to give the strap.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
My dad went to school with Harry Sheeran and Wallace Hendon, and I forget 2 or 3 others. They're gone now. No, Butts was older. They went to Miss Kennedy. No, Miss Duff.
Miss Duff, yeah.
Duff, yeah.
She was
Anyways,
Mr. Harvey.
Mr. Harvey was the principal, and he said they were there one day, and Harry Sheeran was doing something in the classroom, and Mr. Harvey jerked him out of the seat. He'd probably go to jail for that today.
By the back
Anyways,
of the neck.
He grabbed him, and when he grabbed him, he broke Harry's braces broke, and his pants fell out. And if you remember Harry talking, he talked with a little bit of a speech impediment, and he said he was going to tell his Uncle Leslie. His Uncle Leslie Sharon was on the school board. I don't think he ever
Mr. Harvey
made it.
used to put them out in the hall.
Well,
picked them up by the back, well, we thought it was the back of the neck, but he'd grab the back of their jacket or whatever it was and just take them out, open the door and put them out and shut the door and back in, and you wouldn't know anything had happened.
We got to know Harry, John, and he came, but my wife, she's a new bride, and I brought her to Lakefield. She didn't know Harry, and we knew his diction, and we could understand him quite plainly. But she was talking to him one day, and he got mentioning Kit Carson, who lived out at Ray's school. And he said, oh, that Kit Carson got tapping on the corner. To this day, that would have just sailed right by me. I mean, that's the way Harry talked. But my wife, being fresh from a linguist school in Norwood, she still goes on about Kit Carson tapping on the corner.
And then he used to go over to the chick hatchery, and he used to go out to the brooder house to look at the turkeys and the totterels. I spent a
John,
lot
did
of
you have
time
any remarkable teachers, or anyone that you
This
thought?
Miss Beavis, Miss Medill, Mr. Harry Wanamaker. He was my next door neighbor. I used to call him Harry until the year I went to school, and then I had to call him Mr. Wanamaker. And if I didn't do well in his class in arithmetic, I remember I used to have to go to his house after school and do fractions. I can remember sitting at the table. Mr. Sloan and Mr. Patterson. I see him the odd time.
What was his nickname?
Turkey. He was a good hockey player.
What was Mr. Sloan's nickname?
Garf.
Garf. Right on.
Mr. Sloan was a good guy. He was a great friend of Winder Smith's at the Grove. And they used to get together, and the Grove boys had the arena a lot more than the local kids had it.
Mhm.
So we used to go up and play hockey on the arenas that they had up at the Grove School, and go in underneath at noon. And I can remember the old cook used to make us hot chocolate, and he had these kind of cookies that he cooked that I probably ate too many of them. That's why I had bypass surgery. But anyways, we used to go to Harrigan's. You mentioned Harrigan's before.
Uh-huh.
Walk all the way down there, shovel off the pond. Sandy never did any of that stuff. She was pretty. She never got into trouble. I remember one time going curling up by train, and there was myself, and there was a young fellow by the name of Norm Bean. He was the skip. I was the John Graham, and our good friend Tam Grant that died. And we went to, do you remember that?
No, I don't.
We went to the Avondale Curling Club. We went by train, and we went the night before, and we stayed with Bill Down and his wife.
Oh.
And we never won any games, but we had a good time.
I can imagine.
We did, we had a good time. How is Norm? I haven't seen him.
Fine.
Is he still in the States?
Yes.
Harry Hill, well.
Harry Hill, oh gosh, there's so many stories about Harry Hill.
I can tell you one, John.
Harry always had $100 bill in his pocket. And I said to him one, he used to take it out and go like a $100 bill was a lot of money.
Yeah.
You know.
People were making $30 a week.
Yeah, when you were making about $30 a week. But anyways, he said, I said, what do you carry that around for? He said, there's a piece of property in Lakefield that I've had my eye on for years. And he said, I've talked to the person that owns it. And he said, they're going to make a mistake one of these days, and they're going to offer to sell it. And I'm going to just put that $100 bill out. And he said, I'm going to say, there's the down payment. Let's sign it. They won't have the second chance. I don't know whether he ever got it.
And, who was policeman when you were there? Garnet Samus, and who else?
Garnet was the first policeman when I was growing up, and he lived in the corner there in the double house
Right.
at Albert.
Yeah.
And,
Near Ken Soul.
right next door to Kansas. And anyways, I can remember the day that their daughter Peggy got married, and they had the reception there. And Ev lives or worked at the dairy, or at the old creamery dairy. And Garnet, years later, of course, I was Garnet and Ev's neighbor, and I lived down at the other end of Rabbit Street. And I built a rink out on the side for the kids to skate around on, and Garnet, he was getting pretty old. Actually, he never really got out. Wasn't even really getting out at that time, but he used to be able to sit in his big chair and look at the kids playing hockey. No, he used to love that.
Yeah.
And they used to go in, and Evelyn used to give them cookies and stuff. Garnet and Evelyn, remember they had the Glad Patch.
Yeah.
They raised the gladiolas. And anyways, they had them up in at one time behind Harbor Nursing Home. And they had a big patch out there. And Harry Hill said he had been talking to Jack Miner, who owned the Harbor Nursing Home and run it. And one of his girls was washing dishes at the sink, and she was looking out over the back. And she said, Mr. Miner, come quick. She says, there's a pig in Mr. Samus's gladioli patch. So anyways, he went out and he looked out, and here it was Garnet. And he had a great big t-shirt, light-colored pants, and a great big flesh-colored t-shirt on, and he was down on his hands, and he was bleeding. Jesus. There's a pig in Mr. Samus's.
Well, Garnet used to grow those glads up behind Jack Murphy's farm, where Jack and Jean Chittick lived. And we said to him, Garnet, you know, you're selling these glads on the street from his home. He lived right beside where Remax Real Estate is now, that red brick home. And he lived beside, he said, you shouldn't have corn. You should plant corn and sell it with the glads. Well, Garnet thought that would be a good idea, and he planted corn, and he was the police chief. We went up and stole it near every night. We'd take it into Jack and Jean Chittick to have these corn rows, and then Monty Montgomery phoned Garnet and got him on her trail one night. And we came out with Garnet drove in, and he never used to get out of the car, if you remember. He blew the horn in front of Jack and Jean. Have you seen any kids? He said, here I am chewing a cob of corn. Have you seen any kids in my corn patch? Well, he just loved me anyway. He wouldn't have pitched me if he got me no matter what I did. Anyway, that's what was part of my downfall. I said, Garnet, I haven't seen anybody. Garnet,
do you remember Percy Edwards?
Yeah.
Well, Garnet had, he used to have the Glad stand, and he put it up on Fred Hudson's lot. One that's
where the twin houses were.
Yeah,
Right where the country style is.
right where the country style donut, right on the corner. So anyways, in the spring and then the fall, in the spring they take it up, or whenever they were getting ready to sell. So anyways, I was still working at the village office, and I come home for lunch. And I had my lunch, and I was going back, and he grew the glads on the lot that I owned right out to Albert Street, which was originally Mrs. Chapman, or Chappell, George Chappell's mother. Bought it off Sabatino's years ago. But anyways, after I moved into that house, we bought the lot off Mrs. Chappell. Anyways, Garnet and Evelyn grew the gladioles. Well, when I'd come home for lunch and I was on my way back, the Garnet's car was backed in across my front lawn, and he had a big flat bed trailer, and the Glad stand was on it, and they were delivering it up. Well, Garnet was in the car driving like this, and they went out the driveway, and Percy Edwards was on one side steadying, and Evelyn was on the other side steadying. And they went out onto Albert Street, and they went up Albert Street to Concession Street and come all the way down. And then Percy and Evelyn walked beside the Glad stand so it wouldn't fall off the trailer.
What did you do for fun when you were younger? Can you tell us anything like that, all the fun times? Or,
We used to have, when, do you mean when I
didn't
was
steal
really?
corn or anything like that, or what?
We had Walter Dunford that lived over on,
Yeah.
on
Regents.
Regent Street.
Was
Used
that-
to grow
was that
corn and,
Garnet? Was that Samus?
Yeah.
that was
the
Garnet
police.
Samus, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Dunford, what did I say?
Walter.
Walter.
He was the Raleigh salesman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eyebrows, they used to call
He
him.
combed his, he never
He
was
had
bald,
eyebrows.
he combed his eyebrows up over his head.
He used to have a garden that was behind Harry Wanamaker's place. Used to come down and we'd hop over and grab the corn, like you were talking about before. So I think Walter got onto us one year, so he planted the rows that were closest to the old drain that we used to jump over. He planted them, unbeknownst to us. He planted popping corn. And we got, when the corn cut up and everything, he planted a row of popping corn. We jumped over the fence or over the drain and stripped it all off and took it and we put it in this pot and we boiled it, we boiled it, we boiled it. We couldn't figure it, then we started eating it. It was just as hard as a rock. And he made it known around, he made it known that he knew what we were up to.
There's so many
fun.
people I didn't know. That I was in Montreal in 1940 and didn't come back till 59, so I've missed out on a lot of people.
You did so.
Going to school at the public school, we had Terry McElwain there was a swamp. They used to call it a swamp. It's all filled
Yeah.
in now.
Oh, no, no.
All this was all
Now
called
it's-
swamp, Bill. You remember that. When they
Yeah.
put the sewers in 1972, they filled it. That's where all the fill came.
Whereabouts
All the area,
Seniors
even
home,
where
that's
here
the
is
senior
down straight,
citizen
it's
home,
all
that's
filled.
right.
And it was watery and
It was
muddy.
all
and
watery.
We used to go down there
Yeah.
and fall in, you know, walk across boards because we were going to school. And we liked to go that way and we were threatened. You know, Mother would threaten us if she found out that we went that way. But we'd go, you know. And then we'd fall in and we'd be mud up over our knees and we'd have to come home and be sent to bed.
We fell
But
into
it was
a lot.
swamp. I can't get away from, I still was swamp to me.
Well, mind you, no reference, but we old timers in Lakefield think it's the biggest joke in the world that the most posh condominiums, St. Andrews
Yeah.
condominiums, are right in the middle of the swamp. These old timers say, these new condominiums in Lakefield, where are they?
Yeah.
They're in the swamp.
They used to have,
Nothing to look at but the cement works and, you know,
It's nice down
The
there.
but
CN,
they're pretty nice inside, I will say.
Oh, they're beautiful.
They're really
the
nice.
CN used to
Oh.
burn it every year. They used to burn it all off. Okay, they used to
Yeah.
burn it all along grass. And they'd burn it to try to let the new growth and get rid of it. You can't do that now. They won't let you do it. The controlled burns.
Well, John, no, I
We
can
had,
tell you another, this is true. The swamp was the piling and drying yard for Strickland Lumber Mill, which
Yes.
was huge and mammoth, and we have pictures where the whole swamp is full of lumber.
Yeah.
And there was sawdust there galore. And it caught summer, Lenny knows about this, and maybe he set the fire, but it caught fire one summer and it burned for 3 years.
Yeah.
Every
Yeah.
summer, it would start to burn again.
Was it
And
down
the
by the
sawdust
cement
smoked
works?
and burned, and I think
That's
that
where
was
the
in,
condominiums are.
maybe the late 50s, Lynn, when that started, but it burned for 3 summers constantly.
Yeah.
And it consumed all that sawdust that had been there for years and years.
You know, this building here sits where the mill dumped all the
Yes.
excess from doing the wheat,
Yeah.
okay? You're sitting on it right here.
Yeah.
Like,
So, you know,
We
this
had
is
a-
all sawdust and so on, but
Yeah.
there was a lot of that went in, and everybody and all the kids that went to school had a pet rat, because that's what all the rats did.
was that
You
quite
remember
far
that?
down though, down
Well, it
closer
was
to
The part that
birds?
burned was further, the part
Where
that
the
burned was
condominium-
right where St. Andrews condominiums are now,
Yeah.
Prince Andrews, right.
Oh, my grandfather was in the lumber business and his lumber that he used to buy from the I don't know, up around Buckhorn and Burley, and he'd go up there and buy for companies.
Right.
And then they would cut the lumber and it was piled. Remember the old hotel that was in Lakefield?
Lawless?
What was their name?
Lawless?
Remember how long this has been on?
Up where there's a
Lawless. L-A-W-L-E-S.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And all along the tracks that went down to the boats in those days, you know.
45
And my
minutes.
grandfather had his lumber piled there, and then they'd ship it out. I mean, I didn't know anything about it, and I still don't know much about it, but that's where he'd have his lumber.
What was the motto for N.A. Moore's Lumber Company?
Who?
When it's lumber, call our number. That was Pete Moore down where Cashway is.
Better slow it down, hadn't we?
I remember
Excuse
talking
me,
about
John, you're the
the,
speaker.
Get John.
talking about the swamp, when we were going to public school, as we called it, there was a fellow by the name of Tom Staves. Some of you probably know Tom Staves.
Yep.
Tom Staves Jr. He was a bully.
Yeah.
I don't
Was he?
think he is anymore, but he was. He used to beat up the little kids. And it was Kenny Souls and myself, and there was a couple I just can't remember now. And anyways, the train used to come in every day at 4 o'clock, if you guys remember that, in Peterborough. And we made this plan after school, after 4 o'clock, because school was 4 o'clock. And we got down in the swamp. There was a path through the swamp, and we jumped them. Okay, and we threw them over the railroad tracks, and we told them that we were going to let the train run over. We tied him right up to we had it, we all jumped him because he was a bully.
He's back in town, you know.
I know. I shouldn't say he's a relative. He's a relative of mine. Actually.
He's a
I
lot
am
bigger
on
than
there
you,
with
Doc.
every morning.
But anyways,
Yeah, I'm gonna,
We had
have a
him tied-
hitman out some of you, for some of you
we had him
guys.
on the railroad tracks, and the train. You could hear the train coming for miles. You know, it'd blow and the whistle would blow and the whistle would blow, and it kept getting closer and it kept getting closer and closer and closer. And we kept saying, "Now look, unless you promise that you're going to lay off us, you're dying, right? You're gone." And anyways, we let the train, and he was yelling and yelling and yelling.
You didn't want to die?
Anyways, we got the train come up the track until it got to Albert Street crossing, and then it got closer and closer. And when the whistle blew for the Reed Street, it was really loud, and then we jumped and let him go. And he never bothered us after. He jumped him. That's kind of
That's the way they used to end the movies every week in the Regent Theatre.
Yeah.
that's where we
Guy laying across the
Yeah.
That's probably where we probably got
Always a pretty blonde.
Well, they say that they say
We
that
used
kids
to
are
go,
influenced by movies and television.
Yeah.
Well, maybe that's the
Yeah.
start of it. Don had a hockey rink, or a rink, right in that swamp,
Yeah, between the railway tracks.
right between the railroad tracks.
Yeah.
And we used to go up there. I don't know. Ray Sullivan at that time played there. He was a pretty good hockey
Yeah,
player.
Terry
at that
McElwain
time.
was good on it.
Tommy Sullivan, Terry Stanton.
Well, Terry had another arena.
Yeah, up here, natural.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had one down.
Flooded right by his house.
Yeah, he used to have the penalty boxes and everything. It was pretty good.
So,
Going to school, you're talking about going to school. I remember one time Mr. Sloan's class, he had his principal's office, if you remember, just off to the side, because he was the principal too. And anyways, in his class, even if he wasn't in the class, it was quiet. Because it didn't matter whether he was in or out, you had to be quiet. Okay, so anyways, he said before we went to lunch, now when we come back after lunch, we're going to learn what an object is. a sentence. So anyways, it came 1 o'clock and the bell rang and we were all in our places and he must have been a little busy in his office. A few minutes later, he comes in and he walked straight across and there was a waste bucket beside the thing and he kicked it and it went way up in the air and it come down just for a smash and threw the papers all over the place. And he never said anything. And he went over to the blackboard and he wrote on the blackboard, "The teacher kicked the bucket. The teacher is the object or the subject and bucket is the object." It was chalked down. And I've never forgotten. I know the subject and I know what an object is. That's all he said. And well, you were too young. You were still back in.
John, probably the only teaching aid in the school.
He had a hymn book that he hit me in the back of the head with once, and that was another teaching aid.
John, what was Christmas like for kids that time?
Christmas?
Did you have a concert or?
There was always a Christmas concert at the school, and every class had, then they went to the town hall. There was always a community.
Did Santa come?
Santa always came, and I remember there always seems, of course in those days there wasn't the slush on there wasn't the traffic for one thing, and when it snowed you could sleigh ride on the hills, and but we used to have concerts at the old school, and then I can remember they used to ring the siren on the town hall on New Year's Eve. They always had a big community dance at the. I remember my mom and dad always going to the dance at the town hall, and everybody went there. And
One thing they used to have at Christmas, the firemen had a big party for the children of firemen.
Yeah.
Boy, that was an event.
I remember
We
the
never been
Legion,
good.
when the Legion had their little building between the two bridges, that they used to call it the dugout. Okay, and the only time I ever got into it was when they had little things for the kids and that, and there was a lot of other activities besides kids' activities that went on at the Legion. Cliff Byers that lived up on the top of the hill had a horse, and he
Near the tavern on the Turner up there?
yeah. They called it Patrick's Hill. It's called Ray's School Hill now. Anyways, he brought the horse down to Lakefield. He always came down on Saturday afternoon to the Legion, and he brought the horse down. He was all dressed up and everything. So somebody said, "Why don't you bring the horse in for a drink?" So he took the horse in through the front door, across the hall floor, and hitched it up to the bar. It's
Was this after he had a few drinks or before?
well, I think it was probably.
Probably had a few before.
They
we got
used to
there,
start
maybe.
drinking. They used to always say, I can always remember them coming to different places. Another place that they used to go is up. You were mentioning the boathouses. That was a great place for them to go.
Where?
To the boathouses up on
Oh, yeah.
on the lake. But anyways, they had a. They used to have. They used to say, "Do you think the sun is over the yardarm in Halifax yet?" That was about what, 10 o'clock?
I know,
They could start drinking then.
Marie Sloan
But
and
they
I
didn't
still
have-
say that.
They did not have a liquor license, so unlike today where you have a license and to make sure you keep it, you must go by the certain conditions of the license. But they had no license anyway, so they had nothing to keep, so really they drank whenever they were thirsty and a lot of times when they weren't.
They used to do
There were
a
two
lot of.
things that I was wondering about. Why don't we have the siren blowing at 12 o'clock? And why don't we get the clock fixed? I guess it's hard to get somebody to fix the
Turn
clock.
the camera
up
down
there.
Don't work no more. Political.
Well,
Very.
Yeah, they all.
But it used to blow every noon hour, and it was just great.
Yeah, what happened to that? That would be in your tenure when they quit that, wouldn't it, John?
Soon after.
Why did they quit it?
Well, the reason that it blew was obviously to bring the volunteers together, the volunteer firefighters together.
Well, it was during
in
the
an,
war,
in
yes.
an emergency. But when they,
Fire too.
yeah, what happened was the firefighters, as Lakefield started to grow out from the village, like the Kingdon subdivision and the different areas that got building up, some of the firefighters couldn't hear it at different times. And then they put those auxiliary ones in, and then gradually over the years, George probably would remember, they went into different ways of communicating with the firefighters, and it really just wasn't needed. They used to blow it every day at noon to test it.
Yes.
That's what that was.
That was sort of nice.
Don
You always
Hendren,
knew.
Hendren's run the siren for many, many years. And
The
now
Bell telephone had it for,
yeah, but Don Hendren had it for many, many years at the funeral home, and they used to pay him $1 a day. That's what he got for that.
Blowing
Yeah.
the whistle, the.
Blowing the whistle. And Alan, I was thinking, I was looking at George, I was thinking about Alan Clark. And Harry, I said to Harry, why, I came to work for the village in 1967, and the new fire hall had the Alan H. Clark Memorial Fire Station on it, dedicated in 1966 or whenever, because it was a Canada Centennial project. But Alan was still the fire chief, and Harry called him Foggy Clark. You remember? Anyways, well, he said what they thought that it was time for Alan to retire. Okay, but they did really, because he'd been there for so long, they didn't want to really insult him. So they decided that they were going to build a fire hall, and they were going to dedicate it to his memory, as a memorial, and he would retire. Well, then they did it, and everything went fine, but he didn't retire. He, I think it was about 6 years after that before he retired, and then it was, I think Ray Jackman came on, and
It'd be kind of nice to have that blow at noon hour
I used to have,
and the clock going that you could see.
Well, yeah.
we used to have a pretty good curling at the high school. I don't know whether they at the high school, if they have curling now or not. Do they have curling? We have pretty good curlers, like we had,
The clock, I wonder, you'd have to get somebody that does antique clocks,
Yeah, you have a hard time doing
I
it.
guess. I don't, maybe it isn't antique, I don't know.
It has to be.
It's been there since the year one.
well, I think that the other thing too, you have to remember is a lot of people have watches now that they didn't have.
Well, it'd be kind of nice to hear the siren going. It's 12 o'clock, noon.
We had a curling, after the year after I left high school, and I went on to a little bit at Ryerson, as I said before. I didn't really do very good. I really was finished. I didn't really want to go to school anymore, really. I had spent some time helping, not Red Graham, but Sweeney Graham was making ice at the curling club before Red. And we had, I got on this team. There was Bob McCracken and Bob McCracken. Do you remember him? And Dean Lynch, that used to live behind the curling club in the.
Yeah, I know Dean.
And Arnold Graham and myself. I was the lead, or the lead. So we went into the Peterborough Curling Club to this tournament to get ready for the British consuls, they used to call it in those days. You know what I'm talking about. Anyways, we curled 12 end games, and I'm telling you, and Bob McCrae, he played what they call a quiet game, I guess, like it was draw, all the time, like, and all day, and I'm like, and this was not push brooms, this was sweeping, okay? And the first team that we came up against was Bert Harrison. And he was probably the best, and people at that time have opposed to that. And we beat him. And we had a 7-ender on that, in that game. There was a 12-inning game, so we beat him, and that was a shock of the shock. So we went on, and we played the guy, his name was Alfie, but he was the pro at Alf Hill. And Jesus, we beat him. Now Arnold Graham, this was like a surprise, okay, but so we got on into the afternoon, and of course Bobby had to have a drink. And so we'd go from the glass up to the other end, and then when we go back down to the other end, I had to go in and get him a drink. He's sitting there, that was my job. Anyways, we got, and Arnold and Joe Sabatino and I forget who else it was, had just started up the coin wash. They were all in it in partners, and they were just starting out.
Tell me about it. I was a
Well, you were okay. And
I was a tycoon.
Okay, and you were supposed to take turns going and looking after it in the
Tell
evening.
me
Well, it was
about it.
Arnold's
I
turn.
We
that
didn't
night.
have sewers, so we had to draw the
Yeah.
water.
Well, Arnold, it was his turn that night, right? So we get on, it gets on about 4 o'clock, and we win again, so we gotta stay and play again. And we were gonna play this guy from Coburg that was supposed to be really, really good. Anyways, we got a phone call. I don't know, maybe he called you and got, somebody filled in.
I wouldn't answer it if I knew it was him.
Bob was, he was getting pretty good. And I was still sweeping. And anyways, we started in this game with this guy from Coburg. And it went all the way down, and at the end of the 12th end, we were tied. Do you remember that, George? Were you there?
No, I wasn't there, but I remember you winning that.
Anyways,
thing, John.
we won the extra end. Okay, we took everything down to the other end and we threw it. Oh, geez, like I had to get a lot of rice ready for that one, I'll tell you. But anyways, we won it. And we got our picture in the paper, and I still got the picture from the paper.
What year was that?
That would be in 1963 or 62 or 63. So anyways, we had to go to the next round, which was we had to play off against a guy named Murray Roberts from Unionville, and he was one of the best. So anyways, we drove up to Unionville. It was in the middle of the week, and we got it there at 8 o'clock in the morning or 8:30 in the morning, and Bob, Arnold was driving Bob's car, and Dean was with us, and we got there. We were out on the ice. It was all ready, and there was only the rink and then the people that were around the curling rink, the ice maker and that. And I remember we were going out, and you know how you just get pushing around looking. And Murray Roberts arrives, and he comes out, and he steps onto the ice, and he takes a look up the ice, and he said, he said, that ice is a 1/4 of an inch lower at that one corner up there than it is here. I said, I think we're beat. Before we even started. It was best 2 out of 3. We lost the first 2 games. And then we went in and had this great big dinner. And that was about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And then we sat around and we stayed there till 7, and we struck home. And somebody was driving, and I was sober, but Bob McCracken, he was laying over me in the back seat like this. So we got into Peterborough, and he wakes up, and first thing he said is, Chinese food. I want Chinese food. So we went down and ended up at the old Silver Moon. We had a great big feed of Chinese food. That was a lot of fun. That was pretty
It
yummy.
was pretty good that you did that well back then, because you hadn't curled all that much.
No.
But the rye helped, didn't it?
Right, God, we worked hard that day. Well, he didn't work hard, like he just, but there was I think when we beat Bert Harrison, like that was really a feat. And we got a 7-end game. We got a 7-ender. That was one of the. Yeah, like that's
Yes.
pretty difficult to get a 7-ender. And I curled for a few years after I started back, and I haven't really curled since then. I should get back into it.
The
sometime.
old curling rink, do you remember, you people, a lot of you probably wouldn't remember, the old rink we had over by the mill? Well, going through some old papers, I found a share my grandfather had to that rink. And I gave it to Don Good. I think he took it down to either go in the curling rink that's down here now, something, they get these old artifacts and things.
Do you remember when the town hall, Mrs. Dave Beauclair was the reeve when I was first hired by the village. He was still the reeve. Do you remember when the town hall, the front of the town hall was, like, you could just drive your car right up to the front of it, and you could get, you just got out of your car, and then the hydro line, or the telephone line came across the corner and went on out through to Warsaw. The main cable was right across the corner there. Well, anyways, the council, Harold Hamlin was on the council. Now, I don't think he was reeve. I think he was deputy reeve.
Do you mind if you have a little break, John Millage? I made this coffee too.
Okay.
To,
I was just gonna, just before you do that, while I think of this. because
don't go
Okay,
ahead.
I just want to finish this
That's all
because I'll
right.
forget.
Yeah.
Anyways, the council decided that they didn't want people parking right in front of the town hall, like right up, pretty nearly right into the front door, because people couldn't get around the car. So anyways, they authorized Clint McCall to get two no parking signs, one on one side of the entrance and one on the other side. So Johnny and Clint and Doug arrived bright and early the next morning, and of course Harold come over to supervise. And anyways, Clint says, "Now where do you want these signs?" Well, Harold said, because he said, I know that there's a Bell telephone cable around here someplace, and we really should call and find out where it is, because these posts have to go down quite deep. Harold, he said, we don't need to call them. We don't need to call. I know exactly where it is. Where do you want the thing? He says, we want her right there. And anyways, Clint goes down, and about the first 20 blows, he cuts the side right out of this thing, and he puts all the Warsaw, and he puts everything. And I remember they got a hold of the bell, and they sent up, he went back over to the shop. He went back, he disappeared. Anyways, do you remember Ace Farrell? Yeah. Ace Farrell lives in Buckhorn now. Ace worked for the for the Bell, and he came along, and he and his crew most of the day, okay, putting this main cable line back together again to get Warsaw connected or whatever it was. So anyways, the council, the next Tuesday night, well, after it was over, Ace says, now look, he said, I'm finished. Clint, you can fill in the hole, because this is $80 an hour that it's costing the village, and you can tell them they're gonna get a bill for this. So anyways, the next Tuesday night, there was a council meeting, and they were all sitting around, and Clint was there, and he was trying to get them to buy one of those,
Augers?
no, it was a gigger, like for finding water lines.
Oh, yeah.
Just one of those little things that you used to go along and the needle would go. And anyways, one of the other counselors was there, and I can't remember which one it was, but he said, I don't think, Clint, we need one. Never cracked a smile. Oh, why not? Well, he said, all we have to do is get Hamlin to come over anytime we want to locate a line. All he has to do is go over and just go like that. And he said, he knows exactly how to find those lines just with his finger. Sorry, Connie.
That's all right. I didn't, but I put this on a couple of hours ago, and if we don't,
Thank you very much, John, for coming.
oh, you
That's
can
okay,
talk
Connie.
after,
Yep.
you know.
Very well, you'll be here all night.
Yeah.
Well, there's coffee here, so
I can come back again. I've only lived 3 minutes.